Hi everybody, my name is Hannah and this is Pepper and Pine, and I have a knitting tutorial to share with you today. We are using this book called Teaching Through Stories, Jane and Jeremy Learn to Knit by Elizabeth Seward. This book is packed with super simple projects that your young elementary child can do, and the best part of this book is that it comes with the stories that you can tell your child during these projects. We're going to be using some Lamb's Pride yarn today. I would recommend using the bulky weight, which is a little bit thicker, but today we're going to use the worsted weight and size 8 needles. I do recommend using some larger, more bulky yarn for a younger student. Today my 13-year-old is going to do this project, but this is suitable for a beginner knitter. This is a really great first project for anyone who is practicing knitting because all you need is a small little square in order to make this adorable little rabbit. So we're going to cast on by making this little loop knot here, and we're going to gently tighten it around our needle. Next, we're going to place our yarn between our index finger and our thumb, and we're going to use our needle to kind of pull down the yarn so that it forms somewhat of a V between your two fingers. All right, so he's casted on a few stitches, and I'm going to show you how to do this. You want to make sure that the yarn goes on the outside of your thumb and your index finger. So slip your two fingers in between the yarn, then you can pull down your needle, and then you're going to be looping from one side to the other side. Now this is just one way to cast on. It's maybe not the way that you learned, so I would recommend going with something that you're familiar with if you already know how to knit. And if you do not know how to knit, this is a really great way to cast on. However, when you're a beginner knitter, I suggest that you stick with one method until you become really proficient in that method and then move on to learning other methods. So when you're counting your stitches, count them by 2, and in this case we have 16 stitches, which you could definitely do more, but as a beginner project this is just fine. So the knit, we're going to do a knitting style that requires some crossing of the midline, and this is going to be really important for a young elementary student because this is going to help with brain development. So one of the reasons why knitting is included in the handwork curriculum in Waldorf education is specifically for this cross body action. Okay, so we have somewhat of a square, a little bit of a rectangle. It's quite tiny, and you can make this any size you want, but we're just going to demonstrate how to make this little rabbit with this tiny little square. So we're going to use a needle that has a blunt tip and a large eye, and we're going to thread our yarn through the needle, and this particular eye is kind of small, so we're going to struggle with this a little bit. Part of this tutorial is showing you the whole process so that you can see how challenging or how easy this project is. So it didn't thread well the first time, so we're going to try this again, and this time my 13-year-old son is going to do it. We're going to take the yarn and place it over the needle and just kind of fold it. We're going to get a nice kind of a point, and then we're going to slip it between our fingers. We're going to slip the needle between our fingers, and we're going to bring the needle down into the yarn. And really we're using a needle that has probably an eye that's a little bit too small, but my son is going to be able to get it anyway. So we don't want to lick the yarn or the thread because that will expand the fibers and actually make it more difficult, even though it seems more intuitive that you should do that and it kind of brings the fibers together. But this method avoids having the fibers separate because you have folded over. All right, so now we're going to tie a little knot. So we're going to wrap it around our needle a couple of times and hold it snug with one hand. And then we're going to bring it down. So I made it just a little bit too snug, and I'm going to do this again. So we're going to wrap the two ends around the needle. I'm doing it a little bit less snug this time. And then you can slide it all the way down that yarn, and it produces just the right size tidy little knot at the end. And again, you can avoid getting any of your saliva onto your yarn. Okay, so now we have a little knot here, and you can avoid doing knots as well. You can leave a longer tail and hold it as we do this part of the process. However, we're just going to go ahead and knot it at this point, and you basically want to sew in a triangle. And as we pull the yarn through and tighten it throughout our project, it's going to tighten into this perfect little bunny rabbit. It's really spectacular to see, and I think this is one of those exciting moments where you can see a flat two-dimensional square or rectangle turn into a three-dimensional little animal. There's no other sewing that you're going to need to do. You don't need to add any other piece to this project, and you don't need to cut it, of course, otherwise your project would unravel. So this is a really exciting project to do with any child, but especially a very young child who has just learned how to knit, because with this kind of a project, their practice pieces don't go to waste. They become adorable little keepsakes that really delight young children. So once you get to the top part of your triangle, we're going to eyeball going back down to that midpoint. Now, we worked with some brown yarn because I thought that would be cute for a little bunny rabbit, but actually it made it really hard to see, in part because it's a dark yarn and also because we used a worsted weight yarn. So I would suggest using a bulky weight, and any color will do. I think a creamy light color, it makes it easier to see your stitches. It also makes a really cute, adorable little bunny, and you could use any color if you'd like. Now comes the fun part. We're going to gently squeeze these pieces together, and we're going to end up with like a small little rounded cavity sort of in the middle of these two triangle pieces that are being formed as you pull the yarn through. So those two parts are going to become the ears, but we need to stuff in the little head, and I'm just using some wool, and we're going to stuff it into the little head part quite a bit. We want a nice firm little head. And so we can use our thumbs just to kind of round it out there. And if your stitches are nice and tight, then you can stuff in quite a bit. If your stitches are really loose, you just want to make sure that none of the stuffing comes out. So at this point I am helping my son, and he is 13. He could probably do this part on his own. A younger child who's just learning how to knit, a 7 or 8-year-old, would probably need a lot more help at this point. The sewing they could do if you help them thread the needle, and the stuffing they could do too, but they will need help getting those final touches on. So we still have quite a bit of yarn on our needle, which is great. So go ahead and thread quite a bit so that you don't have to tie it off and add more. And so the head is done. We went ahead and just did one little stitch there in order to secure the head. But now we want to continue sewing through the back of the body so that we will have a little cylinder to fill, and that will be the body of our little bunny rabbit. So my son is going to go through the top part, which I do believe that was the part that we cast on and then we bound off. So he's going to go through the top part of every one of those stitches, and that's going to give a nice tidy end to the top part of this project. So we're going to get to the end here, and we can go ahead and stuff the inside body of our little bunny rabbit. And because we did some nice tight stitches, we can stuff quite a bit. It's nice to have a nice little rounded body. And actually doing this project with a larger piece of knitting will make it even more squishy and even more adorable. So this one ended up being super tiny. Okay, so you can stuff quite a bit into your little bunny rabbit, and we're also going to tuck in that little extra bit of yarn as well. And this part's a lot of fun too. So we're just going to go around this circle area, and we can gently pull as we go around. And he's not going through every single stitch. He's maybe going through every second or every third even. And as you pull around and gently pull your yarn, it's just going to come right together, and it's not you're not even going to be able to tell that this used to be a rectangle. So he's just about done now. We're going to lock this in place. You want to make sure that you have enough yarn left over in order to lock it in place. And then you're just going to slide that down so it's a nice, tidy little knot. Okay, so here's a little trick in order to not let that knot unravel. We're going to kind of thread this back into the body of the little bunny rabbit. We're going to pull on the extra yarn, and then we're going to snip it carefully, and then that little piece just goes right back into the body of the bunny rabbit, and that way you've got a longer tail on your knot, but it's hidden inside your little bunny rabbit. And you can do this for any project, and it will really help keep that knot from unraveling. So now we want to make the fluffy little tail on our bunny rabbit, and I have just the end of a paintbrush, and I put a little bit of yarn along the paintbrush, and then I wound up a significant amount of yarn over that little original piece of yarn. So we're just making a little pom-pom here. So I'm going to tie this off, and then make sure that it's nice and secure, because this part is going to get a lot of little play time because it's right at the end and it's going to be quite delicate. So then you want to just trim your little pom-pom, and then once it's trimmed all the way, then we can clean it up. And I've got just a tiny little pair of scissors here just to clean it up so that it's nice and full and all even. And then the last thing we can do is just secure it onto the back of our little bunny rabbit. This took a little bit of effort. We probably could have left that original tail on the bunny rabbit to help secure that little fluffy tail on him, but he is all done. He is super adorable, and that was a really super quick and easy project. If you'd like to see some of our other Waldorf handwork projects, you can tap on the screen right now. Don't forget to check out the blog post that accompanies this video for more tutorials on handwork that you can do with your children. And if you want to see what we're doing on a daily basis, you can find me on Instagram at Pepper and Pine.